Amandeep Kaur. Prior to 1988, Amandeep Kaur had no interest in politics, but when she saw victims of state brutality, this all changed. One girl called Harjinder Kaur Khalsa had come from Australia to get married in Punjab, and on the way back she was arrested at the Delhi airport, and martyred. Then there was the captain of the hockey team at college, Gurmukh Singh, who was so badly tortured by the police, that he was admitted to hospital, and after 5 days of profuse bleeding he succumbed to his injuries. After our colleague Gurmukh Singh died, some of us went to his house to express our sympathy to his family. We found out that he was the only son, he had 4 sisters and he was the eldest. When I saw those little girls crying, I couldn't understand, why can't the police be held answerable for these atrocities? My mind was in a state of excitement. Why shouldn't it be me, who should ask these police why this innocent boy was killed? But Amandeep Kaur knew that asking these questions would lead to one of 2 consequences. 1. That she would be killed in a police encounter. 2. Police will frame her by putting ammunition upon her, and she will end up languishing in jail for years on end. So she decided to not do anything. It was really paining her heart to see deserving Sikh boys and girls being discriminated against. By divine grace she was asked by a distant relative to ferry some ammunition from one place to another. She accepted to do this as she wanted to know why her colleague, Gurmukh Singh, was martyred. But like boys, she also wanted to participate in combat action, and wanted to know why girls were not allowed to. She wanted to hold the police to account for their crimes, and felt this was the only route for redress. She could not stand the torture and killing of innocent boys. The climate of terror was so extreme, that even the parents of boys and girls killed in police brutality, refused to identify or claim the bodies. If they did claim the bodies, the police would compel them to issue press statements, that their sons and daughters were terrorists. Even after complying with the police, they would still be continually tortured and humiliated by the police, being used as scapegoats for any crimes in the area. For these reasons, Amandeep Kaur decided to not get her family involved in the resistance movement, and kept her actions secret from them. She did not want to disturb the peaceful life of my little brothers and parents. Knowing all this, she continued to be involved and committed, and went on to assassinate informants. In her dreams she started getting visions of unidentified bodies at a crossroad, and she saw her own body amongst them. She was haunted by these visions, and knew it was a known fact of history that brutal governments try to destroy the youth of a nation, so no one can challenge them. Eventually she slipped out of the country to the Middle East, her commitment to her family restricting what she could do. Her family never knew what she was involved in, and she did not want to bring harm or shame onto them. She states, "I know that whenever my Sikh nation will really need my help, however, I am capable of breaking all these shackles that bind me. If need be, I will break them. I will be back there in a second with a gun in my hand, and no one will stop me." Taken from Game of Love, by Harjinder Singh. A womanly ethic. Sikhism is probably the only major religion of the world that claims gender equality as one of its central precepts. The texts are unequivocal on this point, and though Sikhs recognize that they do not always live up to the desideratum of equality, it remains an ideal accepted by all. To my knowledge, there has never been any debate about whether or not women should become scripture readers, caretakers of gurudwaras, baptized members of the Khalsa, or freedom fighters. All career paths are, in the ideal, fully open to members of either gender. The third Guru, Guru Amar Das, had forbidden widow burning, seclusion of women, and female infanticide, practices still common in much of India. Guru Gobind Singh made woman, Kaur, or princess, and man, Singh or lion, siblings in the Guru's family. In fact, of course, this ideal has not exactly worked out. Equal opportunity is there, but actual equality is not. What we see in the preceding testimony is a young girl struggling with the contradictions of her society, which culturally restricts women in so many ways and yet is, in the end, responsive to insistent demands of equal treatment, if an individual has the wherewithal to pursue them. Why this particular woman developed the character that would allow her to persist in her determination to take part in the militant movement, is a crucial, but perhaps unanswerable question. When I asked her about it, she responded in terms of her parents' devotion to the Guru Granth Sahib, and the strength that devotion gives her to do what she feels Guru asks her to do. Petite in stature, demure under a filmy head covering, soft-spoken, with pink nail polish on fingers and toes, this young woman does not appear to be capable of executing informers in cold blood. Her deference to men, apparent in her narrative, runs right alongside her obvious strength and courage. She thinks that her own demonstrations of these qualities will push men to even further acts of strength and courage. As one of Julie Petit's Palestinian women comments, men are braver when women are around. She repeats cultural stereotypes of women as sentimental, and as unable to keep secrets, even as her own life story belies them. Like many Sikh women, she does not experience the cultural tradition of female deference, as conflicting with the ultimate respect for women as human beings, and as human beings who fight. Western feminism, with its insistence on refusal to defer in any sphere, strikes many Sikh women as rather silly. How many of those women who won't let a man open a door for them, would be capable of fighting in a guerrilla war? This is the unstated challenge behind many of the discussions Sikh women have about women in the West, who seem so patronizing in their apparent equality with men. From the viewpoint of women who daily risk death, discussion of who washes the dishes seems an absurdity. Among Sikh women with whom I have spoken, there is an aura of bemused tolerance, occasionally verging on outright pity, for Western women who may not have to wash dishes, but who dare not gain a pound for fear of male disapproval, who face at least a 50-50 prospect of divorce, who juggle careers and children in a never-ending whirlwind of stress, and who are still struggling to achieve the right to equal opportunity in combat. Sikh women have always had the right to participate fully in war activities, but in fact they have been more noticeably prominent in support roles, than in actual combat. These include the usual sheltering of militants, cooking for militants, sewing clothes for militants, and performing other domestic tasks. The role most lauded in Sikh tradition, is of the woman who through her own stance of courage and determination, prods the men around her to militancy. Mai Bago, a woman who refused to let 40 Sikh soldiers retreat from a battle, is the historical model here, and Amandeep Kaur draws on this tradition, even as she herself does more than simply spur her male comrades to action. She is inspired perhaps more by the literary heroine Sundari, who in a popular turn-of-the-century novel by Bhaveer Singh, fights in the jungle alongside her male comrades. Julie Petit's study of Palestinian women in resistance, is an important ethnography of women who fight. While describing the full participation of some Palestinian women in guerrilla activities, it brings out at the same time some of the paradoxes faced by these women, against the backdrop of Islamic doctrine and Arab culture. The classic separation of female and male spheres as private and public, with women largely remaining in the private domestic arena, was shattered, Petit notes, by the actual physical invasion of homes during the expulsion of the Palestinians from Palestine, and it continues to be challenged in exile locations, and in refugee camps by searches of domestic spaces and raids on private locales. When women's private arena was forcibly deprivatized, classic gender roles were also effectively challenged. Women in public meant, for one thing, a challenge to the traditional understanding of sexuality, in which a state of chaos was presumed to result from the free interaction of men and women. Palestinian women who ventured into, or found themselves in the public arena, found their sexual comportment crucial to their ability to function effectively. They became sisters, that is, desexualized, to the men around them. The Sikh tradition of the Khalsa siblinghood, forms a ready context for the same desexualization of female Khalistani militants. All women other than one's wife are to be treated as mothers, sisters, and daughters, Khalsa Sikhs assert. This interpretation has two effects. One is that women with whom one works in the context of guerrilla struggle, are sexually off-limits, making possible otherwise problematic situations, in which close physical contact is mandated. A second impact of this conceptualization of all women as mothers, sisters, and daughters, is the element of protection, which male Sikhs accord to their biological and to their fictive female relatives. Female sexual honor, in the Sikh as in the Palestinian community, is traditionally a responsibility of men, and, in an extension of this, protection of the female is a significant part of nationalism itself. It is clear that men have often gone to war over questions of female honor, to start with the most basic element in the complex theatre of princesses and lions in Sikhism. South Asia is no exception, as Peter van der Veer points out, in his book on religious nationalism on the subcontinent. Protection of the female is critical to both Hindu and Muslim conceptions of national identity. It certainly became clear to me early in my dialogue with Sikh militants, both male and female, that stories of insults to female sexual honor were the most likely to provoke tears. Several interviews came to a wrenching halt, because of the emotionalism surrounding reports of such humiliations, and one informant said outright, that Khalistan was needed as a space in which women could live without harassment. All human rights reports emanating from Punjab point out the prevalence of rape and other sexual atrocities as methods of torture and punishment. The terroristic aspect of sexual crime as a war tool in Punjab is made clear by the many episodes in which such crimes were staged in public arenas. Several eyewitness accounts of these atrocities have already been presented here, and most Sikhs know stories about them, if they have not been direct observers. When female sexual honor is seen as something to be protected as a matter of national honor, insults to it will be used as a tool of war, as we have all seen horrifically in Bosnia. But the linking of traditional understandings of sexuality, women's status, and sexual war crimes, is not one that is made by many Sikhs. Since Sikhs believe that all men and women of the Panth are brothers and sisters, insults of a sexual nature are taken both in a very personal way, as insults to one's family, and in a very political way, as attacks on one's nation. As the opening narrative of this chapter indicates, it is not only men, but women too, who view the protection of the sexual honor of Sikh women as central to the dignity of the community as a whole. The young girl who eventually became a member of the Khalistan Commando Force, started out beating up boys who harassed Sikh college girls. One aspect of female involvement in the guerrilla forces, is the likelihood that they would be sexually abused if caught, a factor that several men told me they felt was a defining reason to discourage women's involvement in combat. Though they themselves are ready to suffer any tortures meted out to them, the idea of a woman being violated, serves as a restraint on encouraging more women to join in combat actions. Amandeep Kaur promised that she would martyr herself before she would let any police touch her. I suspect that this pledge reassured her male colleagues considerably. Sometimes men in fact use this threat of sexual abuse in a roundabout way to protect women as well, as we saw in two narratives related to the Operation Blue Star episode, in which women were asked to leave the complex, so that abuse of them could not be used to force men to surrender. Another problem with the idea of sexual honor and the family, real or fictive, as a mechanism to protect it, is that it is linked also to the reciprocal idea of sexual shame. The honor-shame dynamic plays a role among Sikhs, as it does across the Mediterranean and Southwest Asian regions. I have personally heard first-hand descriptions of sexual abuse at the hands of police, from women who did not report it to their own fathers, husbands, and sons. In one case, a woman had been viciously raped no less than 6 times while in custody, and had had chili peppers forced into her vagina and anus, and the male members of her family did not know about it. Indeed, one said, "Luckily, my sister escaped insult when she was in jail." As the woman told me the story, she forbade me to tell her brother or anyone else in her family, because she thought it would bring shame to the family name. Indeed, even the word rape is never used. Euphemisms like dishonor or insult are as far as Sikhs typically go in describing what happens to women in custody. While everyone is aware of the atrocities endured by Sikh women, the honor-shame dichotomy encourages silence, rather than publicity of these. Women are then doubly punished, first by the abuse itself, and then by being at least implicitly held responsible for it as a source of family shame. One interesting effect of Khalistani militancy related to the sexual honor question, is in the marriage market, where now sisters and daughters of freedom fighters have a new avenue through which to acquire spouses. For a man, marrying a girl from a militant family who may have lost her sources of support to martyrdom, or who may need protection from police harassment, is yet another way of serving the nation. Though I am sure none of those involved in such militant matchmaking would view it this way, this tendency is also serving as a new route to upward mobility, replacing increasingly irrelevant notions of caste, anathema to Sikhism but recognized nonetheless. There is a strong sense that the militant brotherhood should collectively take care of Sikh women, including marrying those without male support or protection. Women whose relatives have become famous for heroic deeds for Khalistan, are especially carefully provided for. One young woman, whose husband specifically sought a bride whose relatives were militants, said, "So many girls my age had been dishonored, raped, or even killed. So it was prearranged that if the police seemed to be close to finding me, I should escape. That's what I did. I came to Britain, and Kulbir was waiting to marry me. I didn't have any problem." The Sikh case differs from the Palestinian one studied by Petit, in that the significant ideal of gender equality and flexibility of sex roles in Sikh tradition, is not matched by Islam. On the practical level, however, both Sikh and Palestinian women find themselves having to continue the primary responsibilities of domestic and child care tasks, even if they become involved in another career, including militancy as well. At a recent convention of the International Sikh Youth Federation, there were few, if any, female delegates. Though all the men were quick to express the sentiment that they would be welcomed and respected, there were also comments to the effect that, after all, they were taking care of homes and kids. The idea that men might take the initiative, in freeing women from some of these activities to make a delegate role at a convention possible, which I expressed with hesitation, seemed not to be taken as a serious possibility. Of course, this scenario is nothing new, and it has analogues in the West, and probably every other part of the world in which women have attempted to move beyond domesticity. Among the Palestinians Petit studied, women organized groups to help each other deal with the continuing tasks revolving around home and children, rather than presenting a direct challenge to the authority and privilege of men. They acted in solidarity to make the new avenues they were pursuing possible. Khalistani Sikh women have nowhere near this level of consciousness or organization, and the density of refugee camp life, that makes such organization feasible, has no parallel among Khalistani Sikhs. Total stoicism in the face of danger and death characterizes both Palestinian and Sikh women, however. They become mothers to bring up children who will pick up their father's guns, like the Sikh woman who told me that if her 2 sons got sacrificed, she would only regret that she had only those 2, not even enough to make a necklace, referring to the historical episode in which mothers were forced to wear garlands of the flesh of their children. The militarization of motherhood, expressed vividly in the West in the Nazi movement, also plays an important role in the militant wombs of the Palestinians. Some Khalistani Sikhs have been public about their opposition to abortion, not on grounds of religion but on grounds of demography. Who will pick up our guns, if there are no sons and daughters to do so? In Plutarch's Moralia, a Spartan mother with 5 sons on the battlefield, asks a helot for news of the battle. When he tells her that her 5 sons have been killed, she reprimands him that she had not asked about the fate of her sons, she had asked for news of the battle. Informed that victory had been won, she replies, "I accept gladly also the death of my sons." This example of maternal patriotism, later formed the basis of Rousseau's conception of the female citizen, who would not participate directly in the bearing of arms, but would serve the nation through unselfish bearing and rearing of future citizen soldiers. Sikh men who renounce wives and children to enter the militancy, are celebrated in the long Indian tradition of renunciation of family to serve a larger cause. Gandhi did it, the Buddha did it, Guru Nanak did it. Guru will take care of them, is the common expression used by Sikh men who have renounced family in this way. Guru Nanak is said to have borne the pain of separation from loved ones, in order to immerse himself in the broader pain of the world, and in this he is followed by contemporary militants, who now serve not their immediate family, but their broader family, the nation. As one might expect, sometimes the family members of militants reconcile themselves to this, and other times they do not. The widow of General Lab Singh eloquently describes her transition from a worried wife to a fellow warrior. While we were at Amritsar, I sometimes used to quarrel with my husband, that he shouldn't go into this way of life. That he should live like a common householder. But one night I had a dream, and in that dream the 10th master, rider of the blue steed, came before me. He made me bow before him over and over, to repent by rubbing my nose in the ground. He warned me that I shouldn't criticize his Singh, and he would bless me with another son. In my dream he gave me something, and he told me to tie it to my cot, and then I would never feel scared. He said, "You are also my Singhni, and it doesn't look good that my Singhni should try to stop my Singh." So after that, I would pray to Guru to give him strength. I didn't try to argue with him anymore. I prayed that whatever mission he went on, he should succeed. The dramatic martyrdom of Resham Kaur, who slit her throat with a glass so that she might not reveal her husband's whereabouts under threat of her infant's torture, is another prime example of wifely support. A female martyr, Gurnam Kaur, is venerated in the most flowery terms. Gurnam Kaur was a great heroine of the Khalistan struggle. Her husband Mokam Singh of the Babar Khalsa had absconded, and Gurnam Kaur was arrested by the police. She herself had also been of great service in the movement, providing food to the fighters and carrying weapons from place to place. She was really a brave lady, and our hearts went out to her when we learned that she was in custody. Anyway, after torturing Gurnam Kaur continuously for 45 days, the police finally killed her. She had 2 children, whose whereabouts remain unknown. And her body was never released, so nobody knows exactly what was done to her. Many of the actions of the Babar Khalsa over the years, would not have been possible without Gurnam Kaur. She talked very little, and most of her time was spent in prayer. But when she was needed for some action, she was always ready. As long as the stars are in the sky, the heroic deeds of Gurnam Kaur will not be forgotten by the Sikh nation. When Khalistan is liberated, those people who are responsible for perpetrating such heinous crimes against women, will be punished. We look forward to that. The young woman who described joining the KCF in the opening narrative of this chapter, obviously feared that her family members would not take this kind of Rousseauian posture, so she kept her activities entirely secret from them. Despite the common rhetoric of sacrifice, it is clear that the support of family members cannot simply be assumed. The stories that are told, concern wives who heroically martyr themselves, and mothers who rejoice in the victorious battles in which their sons have died, but realities are often more complex. One militant's sister wanted to get him away from a life of drinking and hunting, and urged baptism at the hands of Bindranwala. But she later found herself caught in a bind of accepting responsibility for his wife and children, despite her painful conclusion, that some of the things he ended up doing were wrong. There are a range of ways in which Sikh women relate to militancy then, from shooting informers to committing suicide for husbands, to desperately trying to take care of sons in a situation in which nurturance is impossible, a dilemma I heard about from several anguished mothers. Whenever discussion of gender came up, however, both men and women supported the notion that members of either gender were equally likely to take on a warrior role. The idea that women are somehow more naturally peaceful, which plays a role in some contemporary feminist thinking, struck nearly every Sikh I talked to as absurd. The notion of males as just warriors, and women as beautiful souls in our culture, is described by Jean Bethke Elshtain in Women and War, where she notes that the Western linkages between men and war, and between women and peace, continue to frame most discourse about gender and violence today. This stereotypical construction clearly does a disservice both to pacifist males and to militant females, but the strength of the woman as nurturer motif in the Western cultural heritage makes it very difficult for many Westerners to accept the claims of women warriors, that what they do comes quite naturally to them. Even the classical myth of the Amazons, at the foundation of Western culture, pictures them with breasts cut off, that is, as less than fully female. Joan of Arc, our other major woman warrior, pretended to be a man. It is not surprising then, given this heritage, that when women get involved in violence, they are accused by some feminists of the beautiful soul persuasion, of simply falling under the sway of violence-inclined men. Though there is substantial evidence of a relationship between sex hormones and aggressive behavior, and though virtually all wars in world history have been fought predominantly by men, neither fact in itself can appropriately be used to substantiate the claim that men are more warlike than women. The first argument, that of the link between biology and individual aggression, has in my mind been definitively dealt with by Marshall Solons's classic counter to sociobiology, to the effect that if you laid all the motivations of individual soldiers end to end, you still wouldn't be able to understand why there was a battle. Wars are fought not between individuals, but between social groups, and we have to understand how those groups are constituted, and how relations among them are defined, to explain why people end up facing one another with arrows drawn. The second argument, that men have historically predominated in all situations of war, is tied to the fact that men have historically predominated in all situations outside of the home generally. Feminists who hope to change the fact that men dominate politics, science, and the arts, cannot assume that challenges to male domination in the military will not ensue also. The one situation in which women have in fact commonly fought alongside men, has been guerrilla warfare. Where people, army, and state, the Clausewitzian trinity, are not separable, where people are fighting on their own behalf on their own home turf, women have picked up weapons with the best of them, and in some struggles have attained high positions. The Sandinistas come readily to mind here. Whether this is a good thing or not is another question. I only note that evidence for female peaceability rests on shaky empirical grounds, and cannot simply be assumed no matter what ideological benefits might accrue from this presumption. Particularly where people that one knows personally are involved, as in guerrilla insurgencies, women appear to participate quite heavily. I suspect, however, that women and men in struggle may well experience their involvement in different terms, less polarized than the just warrior beautiful soul dichotomy, but as complex human beings, with demonstrably different ways of understanding the world. Carol Gilligan, in her path-breaking work, In a Different Voice, describes best the different ways in which men and women understand issues of morality. Drawing on evidence from child development, she notes that women tend to base their actions on relationships, more than on abstract principles, to ground their perceptions and judgments in a field of other human beings. She further asserts that a womanly ethic of engagement must not be read as a female lack of self-esteem or limited ego development, but should be respected as a viable, and perhaps desperately needed ethic for the modern world. This notion of engagement has also been adopted by feminist anthropologists. But I think that the idea of a womanly ethic of engagement can be usefully used to understand the important feminine contribution made by women to the Sikh militancy. Amandeep Kaur, the young woman whose narrative opens this chapter, appears classically feminine with her filmy veil, pink nail polish, and soft deferent voice. Yet she was capable of killing informers in cold blood, a fact that points to the limitations of superficial impressions of masculine and feminine, especially in cultures different from one's own. I take her story also to mean that she acted in a combat capacity as a woman, that her actions were not seen by herself or by others, as in any way negating her essential femininity. Furthermore, her narration is engaged in the manner described by Carol Gilligan. She talks not of abstract ideals like Khalistan, but in terms of individuals she knew who were hurt or killed, people who informed on her personally, considerations for her family. My point is not that there is an inherent or dramatic rift between the way this woman perceived things, and the way that male militants do. I only point out that it was as a woman, not as a masculinized Sikh or a generic Sikh, that Amandeep Kaur killed. Noting the empirical fact that women are often at the forefront of guerrilla insurgencies, and accepting the evidence for differential understandings of moral action on the part of men and women, I suggest that a research program focusing on how women fight is critically needed. I have only the barest hints here of what a womanly ethic of engagement means in the face of insurgency and counterinsurgency in Punjab. No doubt it means something different here than among women Palestinians or female Sandinistas. But to gloss over the possibility of a gendered experience of violence, or to consider that women fight only as Sikhs or as Viet Cong, but not as women, is to miss, I suspect, an important part of the human story. The colloquial understanding of a masculine quality to the Sikhs as a community, elaborated more formally by several academics, is not one with which any of the Sikh women with whom I have spoken, agrees. Indeed, Nikki Guninder Kaur Singh, a prominent female Sikh academic, has written an important volume detailing the centrality of the feminine principle in Sikh philosophy. She notes that the divine presence in Sikh philosophy is conceived explicitly as neither male nor female, though various translators and interpreters have distorted this point, by referring to the divine as he. Culture, that is, has eclipsed philosophy. The Bani, the sacred words, are grammatically feminine, and the metaphor of the bride longing for her groom, as symbolic of humanity's longing for the divine, common in Sikh tradition, identifies woman with human, attributing the most important kind of agency, the impulse to spirituality, to her. Woman is the vessel from which all else flows. Of woman are all born, without woman none could exist, says Gurbani. While it is obvious that the celebrated virtues of courage, bold action, and strong speech are consonant with masculinity as understood in the West, among Sikhs these qualities are treated as neither masculine nor feminine, but simply as Sikh values. Women may be bound to the kitchen and may have babies in their arms, but they are still fully expected to behave as soldiers, if necessary. The frail woman fainting at the sight of blood, or hysterical in the face of danger, is not a stereotype that has any parallel among Sikhs. The fictional Sundari, paradigmatic of the Sikh conception of woman, is utterly without fear, yet gently nurturant, boldly pragmatic, yet deeply spiritual. The ideal is of a full human being, however problematic to achieve in real life. Sikh women then, enjoy a real sense of personhood, and a definite respect within their families and communities, and ideally, may pursue lives as full as that of Sundari. At the same time they face some important cultural constraints. A long tradition of deference to men continues, even among those women, like Amandeep Kaur, who have assumed combat roles. Most important, though unrecognized by most Sikhs, being held responsible for the sexual honor of family and nation, is a severe burden to bear. Every Sikh woman who is raped in custody, and every custodial rape that goes unreported, are part of the price exacted by the honor-shame tradition. Here I am speaking for myself, however, not for my Sikh interlocutors, who do not link sexual abuse with sexual politics. For them, it is the image of Sundari, who is capable of everything, that remains the desideratum. And most in fact, see that goal as not out of reach.